screen and let us get
Thank you all.
going.
Have a good day.
All right, take care, Joseph. Thank you. All right, here we go. Slideshow from beginning. I'm going to make it a little smaller if I can, so I can see my notes. Maybe I won't be making it smaller. How's everyone doing this morning?
Good.
Apparently my computer, I had the wrong time. So can you all see the screen? I hear a little background noise. I don't know if that's is someone off of mute, and we'll go ahead and get started here. I can't see everyone. Great. Well, it's great. Can everyone see the screen? I can't see everybody on camera because of having
Screen is
such
good.
a small screen. Sound good? So it looks like
Yep.
Tom is off of mute. That might be your, I don't know if you have wind or background noise, but I'll go ahead and get started. Looks like we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 9 on. And if you would be willing to put in the chat box, I'm still trying to figure out where the background noise is coming from. There we go. Scott, I just muted you. Sorry. If you could put into the chat box where you are coming from, I know that some of you might even be coming in from Port Townsend, Washington, or the Olympic Peninsula, because we do have a relationship there with the Community Foundation. So I'll be looking at the chat box here. I hope. Hang on. Gotta get that chat out as well. And share screen. Okay. Great. All right, Salida. Well, good morning, everybody. So today we're going to be talking about strategic planning. My name is Katie Davis. I am on the board of the Chaffee County Community Foundation. I also work full-time for a nonprofit capacity building organization called TREC, Training Resources for the Environmental Community. I am not presenting in that capacity today. I'm a community member here in Chaffee County, and as part of my commitment to the Community Foundation as a board member, I wanted to offer up free webinars every 2 or 3 months to folks in the community, and then the connections that I have in Port Townsend, Washington, if anyone's on from the Olympic Peninsula. So you will see resources that are referenced from TREC, T-R-E-C, Training Resources for the Environmental Community. They are free, they are open source, and so I'll be sharing out some resources at the end of the session when we send an email out with the recording. And then another place I'll be referencing is Washington Nonprofits, and those resources are also open source. So today we're going to focus on strategic planning, and I am so excited because I found out there's like animations in PowerPoint, which helps a little bit with PowerPoint, even though they're still kind of mind-numbing. But this is probably what your day looks like if you are a leader or a board member on an organization trying to juggle a lot of different things. And so I'd love for you all, when I say strategic planning, this is unfiltered in the chat box. What feeling, word, or thought comes to mind when I say strategic planning? Let's take a moment there. And you can be totally vulnerable. Thank you, Cindy. Yes, not enough time to do it. Ugh, for sure. It can feel intimidating, and I think because the word plan is in there and the word strategic, it's kind of like, wow, this sounds really big and complex. Traditional strategic plans can take about 4 to 6 months. There's a lot of data that you're pulling in, quantitative and qualitative data. You probably have a retreat of some sort. Maybe someday it's an in-person retreat and no longer a Zoom retreat. You have to figure out who's going to write it. And then you have, that editing time where folks that tend to like to wordsmith, you kind of get into the weeds of we should use this word, we shouldn't use this word, or we want to use this phrase. And so all of that's happening all the while you're trying to do the amazing work that you all are doing for your communities, which is really the reason why you are in business as a nonprofit organization. So the reason I use the octopus is that it kind of reminds me of an octopus juggling. So today I wanted to focus on answering 3 questions, and I want this to be pretty informal. Again, I have the chat box up, but if for some reason I miss a chat question, do this or use the reaction button on Zoom, and you can raise your hand or clap your hand or whatever, and I'll pause for questions, because I want this to be informal and supportive of you all where you are at in your organizations. But I am going to touch on why strategic planning is helpful, what the key elements of a strategic plan are, and then how we can plan more simply so that it's not this arduous 4 to 6 to 8 month process that we traditionally hear that a strategic plan takes. Any questions on that? So I want to pause and define how I define strategic planning. And my guess is that most of you probably have a pretty clear sense of your organization's goals, and you know what you need to do to achieve them. It's in your head, or it's intuitive, like our program is X and here's what we need to do to achieve results. So you're planning strategically all the time. Strategic planning is defined as a process to identify goals and the strategies necessary to accomplish those goals. So the only difference between this and this, as you're doing strategic planning, like you have a sense of things, you know what you're doing, is that there is a process involved. And so that's what I want to talk about today, is that process. So you're moving those goals and strategies from your heart, from your head, from your board, from the back of a napkin, from that moment you had while you were driving or in the shower of like, oh, that's what we need to do, and creating a process and getting it down on paper. So that's what strategic planning is. Not so hard, right? Pretty simple. And yet there are some common reasons like that we say we don't want to do it or we can't do it. We're too busy. And these are totally legitimate reasons. I'm not going to say excuses. They're reasons. We are too busy. You've got a whole lot going on, and strategic planning process takes time. You've got real work to do, definitely. There are things that need to be done. And every day there's probably things that you didn't know need to be done that all of a sudden need to be done. So you've got real work to do. Things are changing fast. And I would say, for one, this year, last March to this March, a whole lot of change, a lot of things happening in fundraising, in human resources, in financial management. There's just things changing all the time. And then finally, we don't want to be confined to a plan. I think there is a belief out there that if you have a plan, you have to stick to it. And the reality is the plan is your best thinking, but that it's in a fluid state. Any plan should be in a fluid state. A fundraising plan, a management plan, a succession plan, and a strategic plan. So those are some reasons that folks say, we can't take on strategic planning right now. We don't have the time. We don't want to have to be stuck to a plan. Things are changing too fast for us to deal with. And we've got a whole lot that we need to do in support of our programs, in support of our clients. So why do we do strategic planning? Because a strategic plan helps to set clear goals and priorities, right? It takes it from here, takes it from here, takes it from here, and brings it down onto paper in one place. It helps you to recruit, orient, focus, and retain great board and staff. I don't know how many of you are organizations that have staff involved, but so we'll talk about board first. As community members, and I know there's a whole lot of new members coming into Chaffee County, and they're starting to look around for volunteer ideas or opportunities or ways to engage in the community. And having a strategic plan, while that plan may not be something you show many people externally, you can take elements from that and use that as external marketing pieces. So you can share with prospective board members or committee members or volunteers, here's what we've identified from 2021 to 2024 as our goals and priorities. It sounds like you have an interest in this area. Would you like to be involved? And so it provides kind of that roadmap to the work that you all are doing and helps others in the community get involved. Another reason is that it helps to raise the money we need to succeed. I am curious if any of you on have heard from a funder. We'd love to fund you, but we want to see some sort of strategic plan. If you put that in the chat box, yes or no, if that's happened. Foundations do that, especially if they are feeling like they're giving money year after year and they do want to commit more deeply. They may ask for a strategic plan. And then finally, it provides a roadmap for everything that we do. So when you're fundraising, your financial management, your programs, who you have on staff, when you hire, who your board is, all of that is informed by your roadmap for your organization vision. Great. So on the chat box, I'm hearing some funders saying, please show us some sort of strategy because we do want to give you money. Any questions on that? Pause for a moment before we go into the elements of a strategic plan. Okay. Just check the chat box here. Okay, so this may look like a lot as we start to walk through the elements of a strategic plan. But for those of you that are in smaller organizations, maybe you're all volunteer run, maybe it's just an executive director and then a board. There are some main pieces that you want to have in the strategic plan, which I'll identify, and then there's some secondary and tertiary pieces that you could include in a strategic plan. So if you have more capacity or you're a larger organization with a larger budget, you may include all of these next few slides, but otherwise I'll point out what kind of the high level elements are that you want to have. So elements of a solid strategic plan. If you think of that plane analogy, so you've got the plane flying at 40,000 feet and looking down, it's kind of that really big picture view. You've got your mission, your vision, your values, and then you may have a theory of change, which is a theory of change is why we do what we do and the change we want to see. Dropping down as you're coming in for a landing, you're at that 30,000 foot level. That's where you'll have kind of your niche. What is our niche in this community? What are some assumptions that we're making about the future? And funding context. What does our funding landscape look like right now? Dropping down to that 20,000 foot level, you're looking at your 3 to 5 year goals and objectives. So a strategic plan could be anywhere from 3 to 5 years. We'll talk about what you're doing on an annual basis to update it, but more or less it's a vision for the next 3 to 5 years. And then what some of your high level strategies are. Dropping down into the 10,000 foot range, that's more if you have staff in your organization. You're looking at annual priorities, your annual budget, your annual operating plan. And then that 1,000 foot level will be work plans, board work plans, program and projects and campaigns that you're doing, and kind of that boots on the ground level. So that's the 40,000 foot strategic plan all the way down to 1,000 feet. So let's dig in a little bit more into each of those. Okay. So mission, just a quick recap, is your reason for being. I'm sure everybody, if you have an organization you're working with, you have a mission. The vision is that brief but clear and compelling picture of what your organization's wants to create in the community or create in the world, the impact that it wants to have. And then values, some of you may have pulled out values and some of you may not have that really explicitly in your organizations, but those are the things that drive the work that you do and also set up those expectations and boundaries that you have for yourself as an organization. And then the theory of change, I don't know how many of you maybe have a theory of change. If you've done one specifically, again, it's not something you have to do, but if you do, it's often a piece, 2 or 3 pages that talks about why you believe that what you do will create the change that you seek, that will inform your vision, like create the results of your vision. So mission, vision, values, theory of change. Those are some elements, mission, vision, and maybe values that you do want to have in your strategic plan at the 40,000 foot level. The theory of change does not need to be something that you need right away. So 30,000 foot level, brief history of the organization. This could be 1 or 2 paragraphs. It doesn't need to be, it was started in 1962 and this happened and this happened and this happened, but really high level. Here's when the organization started. Here are some key things that happened during our time, and here's where we're at right now. So that brief history of the organization. A niche analysis sounds a little technical, but really it's just talking about the landscape in the place that you do the work. What is your niche? So, thinking about a domestic violence organization in the community, they may say something like, we are the only domestic violence shelter in the community. We do have partnerships with organizations that provide other surround sound services, such as housing, that kind of thing. But it helps to identify what is your niche, what is your place in the community, and then you're working out from that place. So it establishes kind of like, here's where we're starting from, here's our niche in the community, and that's why we're doing, we've created these goals and these strategies. Assumptions about the future. Tough one, because I'm sure in like December of, 2019, people were not assuming a way different future. And then here we are a year later, it's kind of like, well, what should we assume about the future? I think when I talk about this section, thinking about the political climate is helpful. So you can make some assumptions that the next 3 years, there is a Democratic president, next 3.5 years, or next 4 years, still a few months in. So that's an assumption that you can make. You could do an assumption about the economy, that the stock market right now is doing really well. And while there may be some slowdown, we assume that there's not going to be a full-blown recession. I'm not saying that's the case, but I'm saying that you're going to make some assumptions in your strategic plan, because again, that's the foundation where your goals and your strategies are coming out from. And then fundraising snapshots and projections. We're going to talk a bit more about this in the details section, but basically in this part, you're talking about your funding landscape. What does it look like this year, next year? And then if you have a 3-year strategic plan, what are you thinking 3 years out? It's assumptions. A lot of it is science and a lot of it is art. So thinking about, here's our best guess of what fundraising looks like in the next 3 years. Any questions on the 40,000 or 30,000 foot level as we start to land? And I'm not drinking soda. I'm drinking seltzer water. Too early for soda. All right. So typical 20,000 foot level things, pieces. You'll have your 3 to 5 year goals and objectives. And in a strategic plan, there's vocabulary. And so I want to define the vocabulary that I'm using. Goals are kind of those high level goals for 3 to 5 years out. What do you hope to achieve? And the objectives. So that, and then oftentimes you'll see strategic priorities, and the strategic priorities will be the things that you're going to focus on a 1 to 2 year basis in support of those 3 to 5 year goals. So the 20,000 foot level is going to have those high level 3 to 5 year goals. A little bit of narrative in support of the goals. So again, maybe a couple sentences that talk about, here's why we've chosen this goal, and here's what what success looks like if we do achieve this goal. Success indicators, I just talked about that in the narrative. What does success look like? Oops, sorry. And so those three are at your 20,000 foot level. These three are elements you do want to include in a strategic plan. So remember, I said some you don't need, like the theory of change, but you do want your 3 to 5 year goals. That is your strategic plan, pretty much. Some narrative to support those goals and objectives. And then what does success look like? And you don't have to drill down in success indicators to say, we're going to feed 500 children, or we're going to house 32 families, but you could talk more qualitatively about success looks like a larger pool of affordable housing in our community. Success looks like a shelter for domestic violence victims. Success looks like getting our, getting food and backpacks to all children in the county who are in need. As we move into the lower level parts of the strategic plan, that's where you'll start to drill out some of the metrics, the quantitative aspects of your goals. Okay, so we're moving down to 10,000 feet. This is where that language I just used, that vocabulary word, strategic priorities. These are where your strategic priorities for the upcoming year. So again, if we were to go back to, I don't think I'll get it to go back. There we go. To the 20,000 foot level, those 3 to 5 year goals are up here. And then as we move into the 10,000 foot level, the strategic priorities are kind of your 1 to 2 year goals or priorities. So that's what strategic priorities for the upcoming year. This is also where your current annual budget would reside. And again, the strategic planning document, the plan itself, may not have your budget in it, but you can have it as an appendix item so that someone could reference it if they need to. Your annual operating plan, I don't know if any of you have a formal annual operating plan, but if you don't have a formal annual operating plan, just this could be a space holder for all the different components, like your financial statements, your what your program goals are for the year, what your staff is doing. Like the annual operating plan usually includes a whole lot of, here's how we're going to do things, here's the strategies we're going to use, here is what our financials will look like. So that's a piece you don't necessarily need to have at the 10,000 foot level, but I would say your strategic priorities for the upcoming year or two, and then your annual budget are the two items, that you want to have at that level. And then finally, for those of you that have staff or are more engaged doing work out in the community, you may have a board work plan. I like board work plans because it puts the onus on the board instead of just the staff. And it's in support of the 3 to 5 year goals and the strategic priorities. So you might include a board work plan. You may have, if you have departments, if you're a large enough organization, you might have department work plans. So by program, a work plan by program, financial work plans, what fundraising is doing, their work plan as well. And then staff work plans. So here, at the least, I would have, and again, it doesn't need to be part of the strategic plan, but do take some time, if you do have an active board, to have the board work on developing an annual board work plan, and then your staff having your staff work plans for the year. Okay, I'll pause there. Any questions? Again, for those, I see some of you, I don't see any in the chat box, on elements of a strategic plan. How many of you, actually, I'm curious, in the chat box, do you have a current strategic plan? Yes or no?
Yes. In process.
In process? Okay, great. Thank you. So no. All right. Great.
Can you give more examples about the board work plans, please?
Yes, I can actually send out a sample of it as well, but a board work plan, often what that will include, and if any of you do have any and you want to share what works for you. You'll have oftentimes what goal is this strategy supporting? So think about, I guess I'll just say, think about like 4 columns going across like an Excel spreadsheet. And on the top, you've got goals, strategic priority, timing, and assignment, like who is assigned it. And so the work plan could say something like, the organization has said that developing an individual gifts program is a goal for the next 3 to 5 years, a robust individual giving program. If you have a small staff, it may be that the board work plan drills that down and says, okay, board members are going to commit to identifying 15 to 20 names in the community and providing those. They're going to do that every quarter of the year. And they're going, the person assigned to that is me. So it drills down the specifics, things that folks are doing in support of those longer term goals. Does that help, Lisa? I think.
Yeah, it does. I'm sorry. It's hard for me to type, so it's easier to talk, but
Yeah, no,
that does. And I would still love to see the printout that you might share with us as well. I just wanted to make sure are you going to send out this plan that the strategic plan that we can reference later on?
Yes.
Afterward?
I will send out a number of different resources, including a board work plan template that you can use or customize. I'll send out the I think Joseph will. So he'll send out the recording. He'll send out the slides as well. So you'll have kind of a whole toolkit that you can use.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yep. So Jennifer, tell me, what was it, Life Plan? Tell me a little bit about that. I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah, it's just a template that I've used to create a business plan, but I wasn't sure. I guess my initial question is more of the difference between a business plan and a strategic plan.
Yeah, that's a whole nother conversation. I can send a resource out for that as well. The hope would be that if you are an organization that is evolved enough and has a business plan, that the business plan and the strategic plan are married together. So I can share that out. I'm not familiar with Life. Is it Life Plan?
Yeah, it's I don't know if it's Live or Live.
Yeah. Either way.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it may be something you could use, especially if you're using it for a business plan, to kind of integrate the two. I really think, as far as a template for a strategic plan, it is just a Word document, right? It's the mission, vision, values, 3 to 5 year goals, some narrative, some history, a little bit about our niche, and then your strategic priorities. So just kind of running down that way. Yeah. But I'll look that up. That's new to me, and I always like learning about new resources. So let's talk about how we plan simply, because I just laid out a whole lot of stuff, like 40,000 feet down to 1,000 feet. It seems like, wait, that's a whole lot. That's not a simple strategic plan. So I'm going to walk through 4 steps that get you into a strategic planning process. High level, good enough, and then you can always grow it out from there if you want. But I wanted to, again, the point of this was just to make it simple for people. So there's a preparation stage, and we're going to go into each one shortly. There's the lay of the land phase or stage. There's the make a plan phase or stage. And then there's the give it life stage. So the preparation, what that looks like, is asking yourselves, your group, your board, some questions. As easy as we make it, there's still a requirement that you need to commit some time to the process. So I think asking that question, can we commit time to the process? Yes or no? If yes, how much time are we committing to this strategic planning process? And you're going to understand as I go into the next phase, lay of the land, what is involved, so that you have a better sense of, do we have time for this right now? Do we have a current plan we're working from? For those of you that do have a half a plan or a full plan, or maybe it's an outdated plan, you've got a place to start, and that's really great. And you might be more in kind of that update phase rather than the brand new, or we're throwing it all out, we're overhauling, we're redoing everything. What level of planning, whoops, I typo there. What level of planning should we focus on? So there may be a need for doing some deep dive focus on planning, or it may be, you know what, we just need 3 to 5 year goals that set us off in the right direction. That's all we need right now. And then we're going to scale up and grow out from there. So figuring out what level of planning that you need. And then who is on the planning team? And on a planning team, I often call it the strategic planning committee. It is helpful to have an ED or a director staff member, if you have staff, the board chair, and then one other staff member, board member, or just a really engaged volunteer. So at a minimum, having 3 people on the strategic planning committee. That doesn't mean they're the decision makers. It just provides a space to keep other cooks out of the kitchen as some of the key things are happening. And then for sure, you're going to be getting input from staff, from board, from community members. And all of those folks are going to be involved in the development of your goals and priorities. But a strategic planning committee, just think of it as like the guardrails for the strategic planning process, and they just kind of shepherd it along. So having staff member, a board member, and then either another staff member, board member, or engaged volunteer. And just to be clear, the planning team is not, again, the decision makers. It's not, if the retreat happens, it's not just those 3 having a retreat. They're just shepherding the process. I talk with my hands a lot, sorry. And then finally, we're going to frame our key strategic questions, and I call those KSQs. And I want to talk about what a KSQ, or a key strategic question, is. There are a lot of words on this slide, but I thought it would be helpful to provide some definitions. So a key strategic question, a KSQ, is a high-level question that your data gathering, your conversations, your retreat, your planning are going to help to answer. It might not be explicitly answered in the strategic plan, but it's that high-level question that will inform some of what your strategic plan goals and priorities end up doing. And the hope is that it can be answered in the near future, during the strategic planning process. It's not just this random question that may not have an answer in 3 to 5 years, and that the answer will help to move the organization forward. So it's important to avoid questions like kind of those perennial questions. Should we be more aggressive, or should we be more collaborative? Also, short-term questions like, how much should we raise at this year's fundraising event? That's not a key strategic question. A key strategic question would be something like, how do we achieve financial and fiscal sustainability in the next 3 to 5 years? And if you think about that question, that's a big question. But you're probably going to have a goal or priority around, we're going to develop an individual giving program. We're going to develop a major gifts program. We're going to have an audit and develop fiscal and financial policies and procedures. So those goals and those priorities answer that bigger question about how do we become more financially or fiscally sustainable. Any questions about key strategic questions? And you might see this, you don't have to use that term, it's just a term that I use because it's kind of that key question that's driving the strategic planning process that you're trying to answer. Anyone want to throw out a key strategic question or a question about a key strategic question?
The example, Katie, that you just used was, well, I'll say it's specific to maybe one of the goals of the strategic plan, in how they're going to become how to become a little more fiscally independent, let's say, or find a fiscal stream to stay independent. Would it also be about their mission, how they're going to stay current in the community, or how to stay important in the community with their mission? That might, I mean, to me, that would be a question as to how they're going to stay significant with their plan. It seems a little deeper than just how they're going to stay fiscally, how they're going to find fiscal streams in the next 3 to 5 years.
So if I understand, is your question, is the key strategic question more along the lines of niche? Like, what is our niche and are we?
Thank you. Yeah, I was just trying to figure out, because to me, the fiscal part is always going to need to be addressed, and finding new ways to find grants, to find new memberships, that sort of thing. But keeping the niche fresh, finding new ways to stay current in the community as it changes, keeping the mission something that people will find important, to me, would be part of what the strategic plan needs to address, especially 3 to 5 years down the road.
Yes. So I think there's a couple things that I would say. One is the question around mission and vision and niche is often one piece of a planning retreat. So as an organization, you are having that conversation and bringing up the question, are we still relevant? Are we doing the work that we need to be doing? It's not necessarily that a key strategic question is driving that, but I think that is an important part of having the conversation. Okay, if we're still relevant, are our programs meeting the needs in the community that our mission says? Or, okay, our programs are not. Do our programs need to change, or does our mission need to change? And you may end up having a conversation about adjusting your mission for sure.
I see.
Yeah.
Right. So it's really two different things, because, and you're right, you use the word I was struggling to find is relevancy. And that really comes down to the organization itself.
Yeah.
And the mission that they have put forth when the organization started, and what they saw as a need in the community.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that I will say, and then I see Lisa, your hand is up too. So I'll come to you in just a second. On the key strategic question, I don't know if any of you have been on the previous webinar that I did, but I talked about 3 buckets, and in my work life as a consultant with the organization I work with, we talk about people, programs, and money as the 3 buckets in an organization. And I think thinking about your key strategic questions in those buckets, like driving, what is the big question we're trying to answer around programs? What is the big question around people, which might be, scaling up or having a succession plan, or sunsetting, and we need to figure out what the next 3 to 5 years looks like. And then the money side of things is often around financial sustainability and fiscal responsibility. So it might help to think about those key strategic questions, high level questions, or in each of those buckets, which I call people, program, and money. Lisa, did you want to pop on?
Sure. Hi. In terms of those 3 buckets and the third one, which is the financial stability, I guess, I'm thinking for Colorado Farm to Table about the pots of money, like whether it's grant dollars, individual donors, and I'm wondering about earned income, which is something that Colorado Farm to Table has none of. And we would like to develop that. So that would involve for us a new building, a new warehouse that we could lease out in part. And so I'm just thinking, like, does that seem appropriate for one of my questions to be uh, along those lines?
I think the high level key strategic question is still going to be around financial sustainability and how to diversify your revenue streams. And then as you move into the 3 to 5 year goal, it may be that, our focus is on becoming less grant reliant, which means that we're going to have other sources of revenue coming in. And your strategic priority, as you drill down, remember that 40,000 foot down, will be, we're going to develop an earned income stream. So really all of that is in support. So that earned income stream is in support of that goal of diverse revenue, which is in support of that financial sustainability high level goal, 3 to 5 year goal.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So the second phase, lay of the land, and there's going to be some resources here that I'll share out, but this is where framing those key strategic questions. So those questions, and usually you have like 3 to 5 key strategic questions that are driving your strategic planning process. And now you're going to start to collect data so that you can answer those questions potentially. So in the lay of the land phase, you may have a stakeholder input component, which could be a survey or it could be interviews, but we'll talk about that in just a moment. You'll have a SWOT analysis, your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats. And then this is also where you're going to review prior plans. If you may have a half a plan or a whole strategic plan, you're going to review your budget, your last year's budget, your next year's budget, kind of get a sense of your financial stability. And then any scenarios, fundraising scenarios or financial scenarios or anything else that's relevant information for the strategic planning process. So thinking about, stakeholder input and what that might look like, you might think about it being anonymous or not. In my experience doing strategic planning processes, having a third-party site like SurveyMonkey, where someone can give anonymous survey data, is really helpful because then you get the aggregate reports. I think that's the right word, rather than, X person said this, Z person said this, and it provides just more anonymity for folks to give feedback. And then you want to figure out, who do you want to ask? So you might be asking board members, I would think, your staff members, if you have staff, volunteers, or maybe you have a core set of volunteers that you like to go to talk with, allies in the community, people who don't support you are also great to get feedback from in a stakeholder survey. So thinking about, is it anonymous or not? And that will decide how we get the data. We might need to purchase a third-party platform. And then who do we want to ask? And some of the questions that you might ask your stakeholders, you might ask them some SWOT questions. So what do you think our top 3 strengths are? What do you think our weaknesses are? Do you see any opportunities in the community that we're not paying attention to? You might ask about messaging. So I think something along the lines of that might be like, do you feel like XYZ organization sends out too many emails or too few emails, or a question around, would you like to hear from us more than we're already doing? So questions, if you have kind of a communications plan, you might ask some questions around messaging that you're using. You may ask them questions about your programs if you have multiple programs. So we have this program, and this program. Rate your familiarity with each program, and someone may be like, wow, I hadn't even heard of this program. I didn't even know that you had it. So you can ask questions to get more information about your programs to help inform whether you are communicating the programs correctly, or that the programs are adding value to the organization, or any questions that you might have that you want to get answered through stakeholder questions. You may ask questions around alignment of mission, and PJ, when you were asking that question about niche and reputation and mission, you could say, you know, our mission is this. Do you think we achieve our mission? If not, why? If no, why? Why not? Whatever that is. There are a lot of, I could go into the weeds with creating stakeholder surveys, and I'm happy if anyone wants to email with some specific questions to walk you through what a sample survey would look like. It's not just all open-ended questions. There is a method to it, but you do have kind of these subject headers, like you may have your SWOT subject header, your messaging header, your priority programs header, and your niche and reputation header. So again, that's really high level, but I wanted to talk to you about stakeholder surveys. And then you've got your SWOT analysis. So this is something that for sure, at the very least, you have your board and your staff doing as part of the strategic planning process, even if you decide not to do a stakeholder survey. And for those of you not familiar with a SWOT analysis, though I think probably most of you are, it looks at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And the strengths and the weaknesses tend to be internally focused on the organization, and the opportunities and threats tend to be more out externally focused. So if you look at the questions there, just really quickly, what unique resources does our organization bring under a strength? What are areas in which our organization struggles under a weakness? What external changes present opportunities for us would be kind of that external facing opportunities. And then threats or challenges, what constraints are posed by the environment we're in which we operate. Oftentimes threats you can't do anything about. You may be able to mitigate them a little bit, but it's important to have a sense of like, what are we dealing with here? And one of those perfect examples was, in 2016 when people were doing strategic plans and the election year, it was, there might have been a shift or not a shift in the US elections. And so if you are doing planning kind of around some really big things happening that you can't do anything about, just having an awareness so that you can pivot and adjust as needed is important. So that's where a SWOT analysis comes in handy. So the next section, making the plan, you can see up there the outcome of this phase of, this is step 3 or phase 3, is that you have focused, ambitious and achievable 3 to 5 year goals. Maybe you don't do a 3-year plan, you do a 5-year plan. And what happens during this phase is that you're having your retreat, hopefully a group of you coming together, board and staff. Maybe all of you have been part of some sort of strategic planning retreat, either in your work or in your volunteer capacity. But everyone comes together, and what you're doing in that retreat is drilling down to get clear on your goals, those 3 to 5 year goals. And this is a great piece that the Management Center in Washington, D.C. has put out that is in support of ensuring your goals are more equitable and inclusive. So it's called the SMARTY Goals Worksheet, and I'll send the link out. It is open source. And again, to review, SMARTY, it's strategic, measurable, ambitious, realistic, timely or time-bound, inclusive, and equitable. And you can see on this sheet, it gives the definition of what each of those might be. So if you imagine in your planning retreat and you're reviewing your vision and mission and you're talking about your key strategic questions that you came up with, you've got all of your lay of the land data, you've got your stakeholder survey, you've got your SWOT analysis, you've got your fundraising budgets from the past couple years. You're sitting in that planning retreat, everyone's looking at the same information, and that's where those goals are going to start to emerge. Like, okay, our 3 to 5 year goal is really around financial sustainability. Our 3 to 5 year goal is really around scaling up and doubling our budget so that we can do more, or increasing our revenue, or developing a donor program. So that's where we're at now in that step 3 is like this worksheet doesn't work on its own, but if you've done the preparation, you've got your strategic planning committee, you've done your lay of the land phase where you've got all your data. Now you're sitting down and having the conversation with the decision makers in the organization, the board and the staff. And out of that emerge your 3 to 5 year goals. Then you give it life. This is another one of those crazy animations that I found. So giving it life, after your retreat, you are creating a plan. You're going to report, monitor progress, update, and renew the cycle. And what I mean by each of those, reporting means that your plan has been drafted and approved by the board. And what is helpful is to report out, at least once a quarter to keep that plan living. That's why I used the skeleton. It was like, this is not just something that then goes on the shelf and sits there, and then 3 years later you take it down and you update it. You're going to be visiting that report every 3 months or so, and making sure that you are on track. And also, if something catastrophic were to happen, like a pandemic, you may be sitting down and saying, you know what, these goals that we laid out, there's no way that we're going to achieve them. We're going to pivot and do something else right now. And that's okay. The plan is not meant to be concrete, like feet in concrete. While we can't move, we have no flexibility. It's meant to be that living skeleton, moving, changing, adjusting as needed. Monitoring progress and assessing results. It's important not to just look at metrics. Not everything can be measured. I love the statement. And not everything that can be measured is important. And that is definitely a talking point that I have a personal mission as I take up with foundations, because foundations traditionally have been heavily reliant on metrics in order to approve funding requests. And not everything can be measured, and not everything measured is important. So just remembering it's important to have some metrics and don't have it be all metrics. Updating the plan, that's what I talked about really in the report out section, is you may end up finding out, wow, we've got this really big opportunity coming up and funding for it for like 3 years. And so we're going to take this goal off right now and we're going to create a new goal. And that's the direction that we're heading. I think it's helpful for boards and staff members to have kind of a mid-year update meeting. It doesn't have to be a full-blown retreat, but spending some time with the strategic plan to make sure that work plans are still in alignment, that the vision that you have for the organization is still accurate, and that the goals that you've chosen are still realistic and timely and measurable. And then again, you're renewing the cycle when it comes up. Oftentimes, strategic planning, once you've gone through a process, it's more of an update rather than an overhaul, unless something really big happens, like you are deciding to sunset or you are merging with another organization. Then a whole new strategic planning process would need to happen with each of those phases. But for the most part, once you have a plan in place, you can pull it out every 3 years to 5 years and do an update. And that is a lot. I think I'm going backwards. Hang on. There we go. Wait a second. How are we getting? There we go. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. That's what I'm going to do. Because that is all that I have. I was going to show you, I have some resources here. You don't have to worry about writing the links down. I'm going to send these links out so that you can access them, but just quickly to walk through. The first one, the Washington Nonprofit Institute, has a fantastic do-it-yourself strategic planning toolkit that's free to all. It has a little video of an organization and how they did each section. So you can actually watch the short video and be like, oh, that's how you do it. Tons of templates for agendas for meetings, for SWOT analysis, questions to ask stakeholders. So it's a fantastic resource and I highly recommend it. The second one is the one that the organization I work for has put out, and it is more of a Word toolkit document, so not as interactive, but walks you through very thoroughly each of the steps of a strategic planning process and identifies terms and helps you to think through, again, stakeholder questions, what you need to do in each of those phases of strategic planning, and provides a framework for the final plan and what you might include. So I'll share that one out. And then the third one is the Management Center. That's that Smarty Goals worksheet that I showed a couple slides ago, and I'll send that link out. So helping you to think through not only goals that are achievable and timely, but are also equitable and inclusive. And then the final one I will send out is a Word document that walks you through a typical strategic planning process timeline. Like if you were to say, okay, we want to do a strategic planning process in 4 to 6 months, here's each of the phases, here's what each of the phases include. And then you could actually write in, who is doing it and the dates that you want. So it's a really simple timeline template that you can use, but I'll send that out as well. And that is what I have as we're getting close. I'm happy to stay on and answer questions. And again, I apologize for the delay hopping on this morning. I appreciate you all making the time. And oh yeah, the question. So I'll actually answer that question if you want. I don't know if Cheryl's still on or maybe she hopped off. To talk about the simple pieces are to identify your 3 to 5 year goals. Like, what do you want to do? What do you want to achieve? And then what are you focusing on for year 1 and year 2? And then having some metrics around that. So there is a way to take this and really simplify it down to just the basics. Is she on? Cheryl on? No. But if any of you have questions about simplifying this, I'm happy to answer them. I'm going to stop sharing so I could see everybody. Any other questions?
I have one, Lisa. Our board has been working on like a 3-year strategic plan for a few months now. And part of it was developing out a new website with showing our impact and doing things like that. And so we've it's a very, very simple strategic plan, and whether it certainly doesn't include everything that you've just taught us about, but we're kind of like absolutely focusing on that right now. And then the other 2 goals sort of are generically written out. And this is probably a big ask, but would you be willing to look at it, or how, just so that we get some feedback? Are we on the right track? What is this glaringly missing? Or do you not, or is that something that you would consider?
So you're talking about your draft plan?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy to give you feedback on that. I think if you walk through to some of the resources I shared, like what the elements are. And my big question would be, did you get stakeholder input, in that lay of the land phase? Have you heard from people that other than just board and staff? Because that's often a place where people don't do as much. They just say, okay, our board says this, our staff says this, let's make a strategic plan. So thinking about who do we want to hear from out in the community is important. But yeah, I mean, you can certainly, I'll put my email in the chat box here. I don't know if I don't tend to do that, but again, with this small group, I'm more than happy to. I'm probably going to stop recording so that I'm not offering that to everybody. Oh, I don't think I can stop recording. Huh. Oh, well. My email's in the chat box there. So yeah, I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, well, thank you all for your time. I'll send the resources to Joseph and have him send them out shortly. And then, yeah, Lisa, if you want to email me or anybody else, feel free and I'll respond. But I appreciate making time today.
Thank you, Katie. It was very helpful.
All right, take care. I don't know how to end recording, but I'll just hit leave.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.